Hello, everyone. My name's PrimeTime Moff. And again, welcome to our podcast-only monthly show, Talking Toons, where each month I'm joined by a special guest. And across two different episodes, we'll talk about toons and toys from our childhood. In the first episode, we talked about multiple different shows and toys. This is a follow-up episode for this month where we're going to focus on a specific show chosen by our fantastic guest, who I'd like to bring back on, and that is BordersDude, aka John. Thank you for joining me again, John.
Oh, once again, my pleasure.
So, this is your episode. This is your chance to tell us about a show. And at the end of the last one, I can ask you, can I share a bit of a show that people might not have heard of to go and watch? And I was like, oh, I love that show. And I'm just going to quickly cover this before we go into the main episode. And the show was Captain Planet. And since talking about that, I then went and looked into it more. And I remember it, but not anywhere near as much as I would have thought I had. Didn't know there was 6 series. Did not know the massive cast of people that were in it. So now it's on my absolute watch list of things to kind of get back through. So thank you very much for that recommendation. This show we're going to talk about, I would like to think is a bit more well known. However, I still think it flies under the radar for some people. So please introduce us to your show, John.
Yeah, so the show that I would like to speak about today is a one-series, 13-episode run cartoon called The Visionaries, subtitled The Knights of the Magical Light. So the premise of this series is that they are on a planet very similar to Earth, just in a more futuristic setting, lavished with all the modicons of technology, and 3 suns this Earth has, or Earth-ish planet. And for some reason, when they all came together, it drained all the planet's electrical resources. And the planet itself turned back into a pseudo-futuristic medieval setting, with the background being a wizard called Merklin, not Merlin for
Copyrights.
yeah. You see him at the start, or a projection of him at the start, from Iron Mountain, which is where his base of operations or his shrine is. But you sort of go forward into this sort of pseudo-medieval, futuristic-esque type setting to see where all your main cast is. And really, it doesn't give you much to go on in the first sort of pilot episode, or at least I guess there was 3 episodes similar to More Than Meets the Eye, in a way, and you get to know the characters a little bit, but there's not much exposition other than these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, and they're all an even keel to start off with, until Merklin, remember, Merklin, not Merlin, voiced by Roscoe Lee Brown, who you may know as a Kingpin from the Spider-Man 90s animated series.
Nice knowledge.
It's a very definitive, or distinctive voice, I should say. He's done lots, but he's got a very deep voice. And essentially he goes to offer the good guys, which are the Spectral Knights, led by Leoric, voiced by Neil Ross. But you wouldn't think it was voiced by Neil Ross if you've heard his other programs, such as the Centurions as Ace McCloud and Springer. Springer and Ace McCloud do sound incredibly similar, but Neil Ross puts on a pseudo-British accent, or at least that's what I think he does anyway.
Yeah.
And the bad guy, the leader of the bad guys, is Darkstorm, and he's voiced by Starscream, Chris Latta. Which, again, given the other voices he's known for, and he also voices another character who's more similar to his other voice counterparts.
He is, yeah. What's his name, the other character?
So that's Kravex.
Kravex, so it is. I should know that, and I'll tell you in a minute why I should know that, but yeah.
But on a sidebar, with the voice actors themselves, when you see the cast, you're like, oh, hang on. They did this character, and Peter Cullen's famously the bad guy Sindar. You sort of hear tropes and tones and beats of his voice as Optimus Prime in Sindar, but genuinely, he is quite different. That they're the sort of main names that I remember in terms of the voice cast, or the sort of big three.
Yeah.
But you have sort of the, I guess, the cream of the crop, the Sunbow powerhouse of 80s voiceover cast animation.
Yeah, absolutely.
At
You know,
that point,
there was quite a lot of crossover back then of these kind of, as you
but
say, kind of simple
yeah,
animation ones. But it's you know what I find interesting with Visionaries, and there are other shows like this that we talked in the main episode about shows getting huge amount of episodes. Like Bionic Six has something like 50 episodes. There are some series that have just got masses of episodes, and then there's these wee gems that have only got 13, which are great because actually you can watch it on a Saturday. If you've never seen this before, go get yourself a nice box of sugary cereal, sit down a Saturday morning, and you could have a great wee morning, rattling through 13 episodes that are probably they're not even probably 22, 23 minutes long. You could easily watch through this in a kind of half a day, and that's a great way to
yeah,
spend your kind of Saturday morning. Rather than, I think that's the daunting aspect. I have that feeling with the on our kind of main show. We've been talking through quite recently the Unicron trilogy, and I've never seen Oliver Madden. I've never seen any of the other two. The fact that they're over 50 episodes a piece, that's a daunting task to sit and go, I want to try and watch this. I'm like, where am I fitting at this time in my life where I've got two kids, a full-time job, a toy business, a YouTube show, a convention? Where am I fitting in time for 50 episodes? But there are days where I'll go, I'm going to have a wee afternoon off or a wee morning off. I could sit down and do 13 episodes. I think that's a more enjoyable bit. So hopefully for people who are listening to this and haven't seen it, it's something that you can really grasp onto and actually go and enjoy in a fairly easy way rather than the full bit. And as you say, the first couple of episodes set you up with a story. The bit that rewatching it in the lead up to this, and I would never have noticed this as a kid, and I know I've had this thought before, but it's funny how all the armors are already, set up to have these totems installed in them. Like, what was the purpose of that
yeah.
bit on the front of their armor beforehand? Like, it's serving no purpose from a form and functionality point of view. What designers going, like, I'm going to design you an armor suit, and I'm going to just leave this bit in the front, and all these are going to have this. Even the guys who don't make it, they still have it. So it's not as if it's obvious that, oh, look, there's only 12 of them. I've got them. They're the ones that are going to survive. Everybody has it, but why? Like, what was the purpose of those before they had the totems installed from Merklin?
Well, that's it, and it's like the characters that have the staffs, they have pictures in them as decoration, sort of prior to
Yeah.
getting them magically infused. So maybe it was just animation.
I mean,
It's
it's one of those ones you can't. Why try to apply logic to things that were literally just to sell toys? They were.
yeah,
Even these were. We did get Visionaries toys, and I do very much want to talk about the Visionaries toys. But the whole purpose of this 13 episodes was still to sell toys, whether it was 13 episodes, 50 episodes. Their main aim of this is it's to back up a toy line. And we also had Visionaries comics, which, as we would know from people on Transformers, a show that it was in Transformers comics, it's Transformers Universe. And technically, I suppose we did have a Transformers versus Visionaries comic from IDW, which was a very interesting take, and probably the only real new media we've had in the 40 years since, I don't know exactly what year Visionaries came out, but it must be around 40 years. Probably say I'd reckon 85, 86. So, it's a show that had 13 episodes, is very fondly remembered by a lot of people, those that saw it, but has never really clicked into others, any kind of reboot or anything. There's been wee small releases. I think for those that can't see, which is everybody, I think in your background, does that look like is that the San Diego Comic Con Leoric in the background that you have?
it is. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so what was that, the box set for Revolution? Is that right? The
yeah. I think they
IDW
called it
comic?
Sector 6 or something because it was.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Because was that not they were pitching the idea of all these kind of franchises kind of doing either movies or new cartoons or stuff with them. And everybody was
Yeah.
Was it Sigma 6 or something? I think you're
Yeah,
right.
it could
Yeah.
be. It's
But it came to nothing. It came to disappointment. That's what it came to.
disappointed me when they didn't do any more.
I know.
Visionaries. Sorry, I swore.
It's okay.
PG kids. Um, but the cartoon itself, now, I think because the cast was so tight, it wasn't like your other cartoons at the time where they had to push. Hey,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
here's Guzzle. He's a tank. Don't worry, he'll blend in with the crowd. It's because they kept it to that core cast. They never, in terms of where they would sell the toys, you had your
Yeah.
supporting cast and things, but it did give them time to get that character development over the
Yes.
13 episodes, and you got a bit of backstory on some of them. Like you found out Ektar, who transforms into a fox, was a cop in a before the age of magic. And his counterpart to that was Recon, who turned into a lizard.
Mm-hmm.
He was a master criminal, and they'd met and crossed paths. But you see the likes of in the sort of latter half of the episodes, they visit a shanty town, like a cowboy-esque western setting to capture these three wizards. And you see Ektar grabbing what was a snitch,
Mm-hmm.
a stoolie, trying to get information. And you hear just a little bit more of the backstory from Cryotech, the sort of big bear muscle character, saying times may change, but Ektar will always be a cop and he'll always be a stoolie. So while it wasn't, fully fleshed out like we'd see in, say, like the 90s Spider-Man series,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
they had obviously a lot more to go on.
Yes.
You got all this sort of backstory and the romance between Cryotech and Galadriel, voiced by Susan Blue. I think she was probably a crush for many a young boy
Yes. Yeah,
back in
yeah,
the day. I
yeah.
would think, anyway.
I would reckon so, yeah.
But the episodes are also sort of interwoven as well.
Mm-hmm.
They do. It's not like, again, we say, I always pick on Transformers because it's the easiest one. A lot of the times, it didn't matter what happened in the next episode; it was all
Yeah.
reset.
Yeah, no repercussions.
No, whereas with this, even from the first sort of 3 pilot episodes, you had one of the wizards that they tried to capture at the end
Mm-hmm.
of part 3.
Yeah.
He escaped, and then you had an episode where the Darkling Lord stole Merlin's orb, which gave him this magical power in his shrine. And at the end, basically what happens is, that's one of my favourite episodes, worth a watch. Essentially what happens there is the orb goes back to the holder because they use the secret sacred spell, which is basically brings the end of the world, but really it's just a ruse. So they have to run back to the wizard that they stole the orb from, and he's been put in a jail with the rest of the wizards, and they all escape. So then it follows on where they've got to capture those wizards back. So it all makes sense. I think this series, and also in Humanoids, the writers had basically been given carte blanche because it was like, we're not doing anything else after this. The toy line's not getting renewed.
Yeah.
Just do what you want. And you sort of see that in the very last episode of Visionaries, which is called Dawn of the Sun Imps, which is just batshit crazy. It's basically little imps with magical powers that just you wouldn't think they'd wreak havoc. Essentially gremlins. But they just tear through the planet, and it's up to the good guys and bad guys to join forces this one time to get them all back in their little strength. And you get the fourth wall break at the end. And that's where they left it.
Yeah.
Yes, Merklin winking at you at the end, and you're like, oh, so we've been in. He knows we've been watching all this time. A bit like Deadpool.
Yeah, it's very much an interesting one, and as you say, I think the aspect of them not having to push a toy line, new characters every bit. And I suppose Transformers did that. Season 1 didn't really have as much of a feel of that than the rest of it. Obviously, as season 2 and 3 come on, you can kind of see it feels like that. Christ, the movie is essentially just let's push you all new toys, but it does it so well. But Visionaries just gives you a chance to develop the toy line, develop the characters, It is a fun watch. It is one that I look back on. Like, I like the idea of them trying converting into a different animal and the different kind of totems. I have the Kravix's totem, and I can never remember the name of what it is he transforms into, but I have that on as a tattoo. And I remember when we were sitting with my pal Graham, who's my tattooist, who designed all my tattoos, and we're sitting talking about different things. And I showed him, I says, I want something from Visionaries, and I think I want this. And he was like, oh, and he got all excited, and I don't know why, but it was because he got to use, he bought this green at one point, and he just thought, this looks beautiful, and he got to use it for the first time. And now, it was only really do an edge highlight, but he was just so happy to use this funky green that even when he was doing it, I was like, we need to find another reason to use that green. So we literally came up with another character idea on my arm just to use that green. But the Visionaries is one that there is a bit of love for. There's probably more known about it than some others, and that's due to the wonderful Mapes brothers who have um, created such a library of information about Visionaries. And I don't know if you had a chance, and it was 2019 TFN, they did a panel on the Friday, and I told them this so many times, it's the favourite panel I've ever done at TFN because it was just, I remember reading about that it was there, and I was like, "Oh, Visionaries! I like Visionaries." And my mind was blown. They talked about the stuff that were potentially a movie and all this, loads of different information, and they had so much resources, and the amount of information they have in Visionaries. And then, again, we're going to talk about toys in a minute, but they have catalogued this stuff and made such an effort to get the information for themselves, but also to share it, which is an incredible thing for them to do for the community. And it is really interesting that as much as we've not seen a Visionaries on the screen, it's not as if there's not been attempts at it. It's just they've clearly, whoever is trying to push it at the time, just has never found the right way to do it, which is a shame because I do think I
Yeah.
worry that the longer we go from it, the harder it would be to bring Visionaries back. If I'm honest, I think would kids today connect with it quite as much? I think if they had the toys, let's be honest, the toys and the holographic bits were amazing. Holographic toys are cool as anything. We had a few back in the kind of 80s. Visionaries really clicked on it, and I think it worked really well. I think if they brought that back, that would help with it. But I just don't know if that's going to happen. I know you're San Diego, and it's just a printed one rather than a holograph. And I think there's cost implications to it, but there must be ways to do it. There must be someday. We were talking beforehand about Ramen Toys, who have produced toys for like Centurions and Mask, and what else have done? Centurions, Mask,
I've done
Silverhawks.
Silverhawks, yeah.
Yeah, and Visionaries, Bionic Six, Dino Riders. These are ones that are quite often mentioned on posts that they put up. But what could they do next? And I think it's that you want
Yeah.
somebody to take that somebody to appreciate and love the original material to produce new bits. So let's talk about the toys. So we only got one wave of toys, although there was unproduced toys that we'll quickly mention at the end. But tell us about the toys, John. What do you remember of the toys?
Yeah. So for me, it was quite interesting with the toys. Again, I don't know whether it's just because I'm based in the Borders. We were kind of in the slap bang in the middle of Scotland, but I remember seeing Visionaries on BBC, but I never seen it when it was on, I want to say, the Broom Cupboard.
I think it was, yeah.
The only reason I say that is because there's a sidebar here. There's a guy on YouTube called Stuart Millard who watches a mixture of old stuff, whether it's old Broom Cupboards, old Live and Kick-Ins, Bobby Davro specials. And he was just watching that because of that stuff like the Broom Cupboard, that there's no archive for it. It's been lost. Whether the BBC's, yeah,
that's a bizarre thing to think of, actually, that the cartoons themselves have got archives. Some of the things never get released because of rights, but you would never think of things like the Broom Cupboard, that your Broom Cupboard, your Going Lives, your all these kind of bits are never going to get a DVD release of them because they're just there'll almost be like, what's the desire? Like it's the kind of show that you had to watch at the time for it to be relevant.
Yeah,
You know, same as into the 90s when you got a bit older, like the Big Breakfast. Like the Big Breakfast was amazing at the time, but you're never going to get a DVD of that because what would you put on it? Same as your broom cupboard. What are you going to put on it? Like a best of something like that would be good. You know, we talked in the first episode about Glenn Michael's Cartoon Cavalcade. And I went and looked after we were chatting recently about it, and there's very little on there actually to go back and watch
yeah.
because it's the stuff that was around about introducing the shows to us. So it'll live on in our memories, but it's not the same. It's going to have the same affection as a cartoon would actually have.
No, that's it. And again, our children, they don't have that anymore. I think the
No,
last sort of kids show that I can think of that maybe my brother watched was Dick and Dom in the bungalow, and
Condom.
and I think that was probably it
Yeah,
in terms of that sort of breakfast telly,
style.
because then
Hmm.
they just sort of scrapped it and went digital. But yeah, getting off the beaten track as I will wander. I'm an old
Sorry, go.
man. I'm 40.
Young
uh,
man, young man.
yes, but so the way I sort of remember seeing Visionaries first was it's twofold. So I think I seen the toys first in Pound Stretchers, and they had like this would have been after it had been aired, maybe a couple of years after it, and there was just loads of them on pegs hanging in the back wall
Hmm.
where the toys were. Loads of copies. If you went back in time now and
I
you
know.
could pick up that stuff, you'd be fucking like,
Madness, madness.
um,
It's always the stuff that went on clearance that ends up being the
yeah.
hardest to find later on, which is doesn't make sense really. Like it's like it wasn't
Uh,
popular, but now it's suddenly anyway.
and in terms of the cartoons and stuff, you used to get like VHSs with colouring books. Like it was like a little gift pack. Like they did Visionaries, I think they did Transformers and Shoe People, you know,
Oh, sure,
stuff like
people,
that.
sure, people. And now you've got me.
um, so I remember my uncle got me that the Visionaries and the colouring book, and it had the first two episodes. I thought we'd have all three. I was gutted. Um,
That's the madness. Why would you only read?
yeah,
Oh,
money.
yeah.
Tape must have been expensive back in the late 80s.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was literally with the toys. I make no bones about it. I was very lucky as a child. Christmas is my paint. Well, my mum, my dad's shit with money, but we'll not get into that. She saved up all year. They did the old vouchers. I don't know. Well, it's left to shop now, but whatever the equivalent was,
Yeah.
she'd do that stuff like that. Just because they were working class, but with things like the Visionaries and Pound Stretchers, I remember getting one pretty much every weekend till I had all the carded figures because I don't know what they would have been
Yeah,
then.
they would be expensive, I bet you.
Quid, £2 maybe, because they were in. That was when
Clearance,
Pound
yeah.
Stretchers was good.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
Before now, it's terrible now, kids. Don't go in.
yeah.
Terrible.
It really is actually to be fair, terrible now.
The last good thing I seen in Pound Stretchers was they had some of the Thundercat 2011 line.
Yeah.
And it was
Jeez.
the mutant vehicle with a little lizard. Not
The,
even.
I'll go to a Pound Stretchers one. The last thing that I got at Pound Stretchers that I thought was brilliant, and I can't remember the name of it offhand, but it was essentially like a modern version of Dino Riders. So it was like prehistoric beasts. It was I've went and looked for the website and I found the toy company and everything to try and see if I'd missed any. And post this, I'll send you some pictures, John, because you'll appreciate them. But they were essentially were like prehistoric ones. So they had like a triceratops and they had stuff. The one that is still on one of my shelves is they had a shark, but they were just like modern version of Dino Riders, and they were brilliant. But they were also dirt cheap because they weren't a branded thing. They were just like Jurassic Adventures or Prehistoric Adventures, something like I can't remember offhand,
Oh yeah.
by some dodgy company. I first saw them in Smiths, but they only had it was like a gorilla and a T Rex. It didn't really look that didn't have like the ride-on facility, but the smaller characters all had that, and it was just like that's amazing. It took. I remember at the time saying, "This is what pound stretchers used to be: epic little kind of cool toy lines and loads of them and dirt cheap."
Yeah.
But they've since then that was when there was a good pound stretchers near me. Now it's all the only one that's near me is awful,
Yeah.
awful.
I bet the line you're thinking of, I bet the company that makes them is called Chap Me. I bet you it'll be them or something like that.
I think
They
it's. I've got my head. It's like Reynolds or something actually. But
ah,
anyway, but I'll
yeah.
find them and I'll send them to you. Jurassic Clash, Jurassic Clash. That's what it was called.
Oh,
There you go.
what a name.
Yeah, just I've got in my
Uh,
head. Yeah. So pound stretchers for your visionaries.
yeah. So I got the figures, slowly and surely. It probably felt like an eternity when I was younger when getting them all, starting off with my favourite visionary, which would have been Witter Quick when I was younger, because everybody liked Witter Quick. I mean,
Oh, I was Kravitz. Like Starscream's
uh,
voice. Starscream's voice just did it. Like all my favorite characters for things he was in were Starscream. Like it was Starscream, Cobra Commander, Kravitz, and then Rasp and Dino Riders. I just loved his voice. Like he just
yeah.
there was something about the way he delivered a line was just brilliant.
Did you know he was in Roadhouse with
No,
Patrick Swayze?
oh damn, I'm gonna have to go and watch Roadhouse now. No, that's amazing. I love when you find out that voice actors were in shows like Greg Berger's in Police Academy 6.
Yeah.
But yeah, now I
I'll,
have to go and watch Roadhouse. Right, okay, yeah, I'm cool with
not.
that.
I'll let you figure out where he is. I won't spoil it. But
Is
it's
he
near the start.
does he play Patrick Swayze?
You wouldn't know it was him because he doesn't sound like you'd think. But
Oh, I'm into it. I'm into it.
when you see him, he's in the bar. He's a sleaze, but
Yeah. Well,
you'll see it.
the interesting bit you're saying about the pound stretcher, so like I shared in the first episode, and that my mum and dad got us stuff that was on clearance. So
Yeah.
Visionaries is a toy line that I, as a child, had all bar one of. Like, and that didn't happen. We didn't have a lot of things like that. It was the only one I didn't have was a Dagger Assault, which I now have. I got one off eBay, and a stupidly low price. It wasn't complete, and I was like, I'll try and complete this. And then I just went, do you know what? I don't actually need to complete it. Came with a kind of tatty box, and I don't mind things not being 100% complete on lines that I just kind of like. These aren't on display anywhere. To know I've got all the vehicles, all my figures bar one, all had O-ring problem, of they all snapped. Every single one
Yeah.
faded away over time. So every now and again I go through it. I'd like to recollect these, but they're not expensive to get them loose. But every time I touch a loose one, I go, "Oh, this is dangerous." And
Mm-hmm.
I should look into because I'd imagine you could probably get O-ring replacements and you could replace these because these are obviously the same
Oh, yeah.
kind of O-rings as your kind of GI Joe figures that connected the body and the legs together. And I didn't mind them even breaking when I was a kid because I knew that if a toy broke, I wasn't getting it replaced. So I would come up with stories that they had lost their legs in an accident and they were just now disabled,
Yeah.
which is a bit bizarre. But I was like, I know I can't go and ask for something new. But yeah, I was like you, like these were not massively expensive, so I had everything. We had This was a line that we got at Christmas, and this was rare that we would get. Me and my brother get the same thing, but we both got the cap. I'm trying to remember the names. That's why I've got my phone up. The Captor's Chariot and the Skyclaw each, and then a selection of figures. And then my birthday's in the February, and I remember very vividly getting the Lancer Cycle, and then more figures. But yeah, I absolutely loved them. I loved Cinder. Cinder was one of my favorite toys. I just thought he was a cracking looking toy, like a really nice
Yeah.
figure. The toys are really, really nice put together. The holograms just are beautiful. Like, and the bit that isn't that I always forget, well, not forget, but it isn't really talked about enough is the fact you could actually take the kind of totems off and you could switch them around and change them. Which when I have rebought these figures at points to try and recomplete the figures in better condition at times, and they've all ended up still going the same way. That was always the challenge, trying to get the ones that were the right bits. The amount of times you go on figures on eBay and they're the wrong chess pieces on them. But I look and go, there's only 12 of them. I know I never had recon. Even in the Dagger Assault I got, it was loose. It was missing the kind of blue chariot on the top, and the two side panels, which are the bits that are hardest to get and most expensive.
Yeah.
He never had recon, so I've never had a full set of the figures, but bar one, which there's that toy lines like this Bionic 6 that I talked about, I like because as much as they're not cheap, right? It's not cheap to buy a Dagger Assault. It's not cheap to go and buy this stuff. There's an end. Like you and I
Yes.
collect a toy line that there's never an end. There's generally never an end. Like I get new Transformers in on an almost weekly basis, and my wife always goes, "When do you finish?" And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I ever finish because Transformers is an evergreen product that has got so much stuff coming out. Like going back and doing mask, I started a mask collection. I did a toy trip last November, 5 days of hunting toys down south, and I started a mask collection on that trip. Like I just decided I'm going to collect mask. That's why not. But I got some big hitters, like I got a Boulder Hill and stuff. But it was so nice because I was like, right, okay, I've got an end. Like I know where I can just do a checklist and go, I forgot that. Yep, that's it done. Whereas in Transformers, it's never going to. So it's quite nice. I quite like having a wee, like the Bionic 6 one very much felt like that, being able to get that headquarters and go, I've got everything. Yeah, maybe I could do it in better condition, but and I suppose you can kind of do that with Transformers if you just go like, I'm only collect G1 and you kind of put boundaries on it. But there's just so much of other things that it's hard to. But something like a Visionaries, out with because they did a SDCC, was it Mighty Mug or Mighty Pop or something?
Oh,
Remember they
yeah,
were
yeah.
kind of before something that looked like Pops before there were Pops. So there's a wee bit of something there, but other than that, you've got 8 single figures and 4 vehicles. That's a fairly achievable if you really set your mind to it. You could probably go, I'm going to go and collect that tonight, and you could probably go on eBay. It's not going to be cheap, but I would imagine you could go on eBay tonight, and if you had the resources, you could just go and buy them all, which is a nice thing, and it's nice and it's small. And what I love about them is, you and I have displays. I can see our videos, yours and mine. The displays of Transformers is just like overwhelming. My whole room I'm in is all Transformers. I changed that to be my Transformer room, and yet I don't have everything out. Whereas if I decided to have a Visionaries collection and have it out, it'd be on a shelf. Like it'd be on a wee section of 2 bits of a Kallax, and it could be done. Like 2 or maybe 4 cubes of a Kallax, and it'd be done. And there's a joy in that we'll never experience in the Transformer side of it.
Yeah, it's true. There's another toy line I've more or less completed, apart from one vehicle, but I'll not touch on it because we might circle back to this in the future. It's James Bond Jr.
Yeah, that
And
is one I'd like to come back to because what I would
so,
like to do with that one is that's a show I've never watched, never experienced. So that might be one we do, and we can, I can go and experience it. And maybe do that. Maybe that's a good one. To maybe do in person. You can bring some of the toys. We can do
yeah.
a pub meet at one point. We can experience them. I love to experience new toys, and I don't know if you've ever been any kind of bigger toy fairs. I did it at Sandown. I met some of the guys from Transformers show, but me and my friend Kev had went on this toy trip for 5 days with Sandown kind of being in the middle of it. And it was incredible to experience 80s and 90s toys as if you were experiencing them in a toy shop and for the very first time. We'd went to things like Leicester Vintage. We seen the guys from Kapow. We went to In Demand. We went to Nerd Base, which is one of the coolest shops I've ever been in my life. We went to Manic Miners in Manchester, who are just outside Manchester, sorry, who I end up talking to come to TF UK Con. But see, when you go to these shops and you go in and find new toys, new toys of toy lines you knew about. See, when you find toy lines you've never heard of, and you're like, oh, what is this? And it's great because generally people in the stores know their stuff, so they then just fill you in. So the idea of chatting about a show like James Bond Jr., which I've never ever watched, which is crazy because my dad's favorite film series is James Bond. Like I have a genuine love for James Bond because watching James Bond films with my dad is one of my favorite memories for being a kid. I don't know why I've never ever. It's never. I think I was just a bit too old for James Bond Jr. But I would love to experience that with you, John, and kind of go through that. So we'll certainly pencil that in for a future episode.
Yeah.
So kind of coming to time on Visionaries. I got through a couple of episodes to rewatch prepping up for this, and I very much said to my boys, you fancy watching this at the weekend? I watched one of them with my youngest last night, and he was quite into it. So I think I'm going to watch more of it this weekend. And like, as I say, a good thing is I could kind of get through most of it in one sitting. But it's been a joy to sit and talk about Visionaries. You know, as I say, I remember going just after I had got my tattoo, and I love my tattoos. My tattoos are like proper talking pieces for 80s cartoons. So up my right sleeve, I've got all 80s cartoons, 80s villains, sorry, and up the right hand side is 80s good guys. And I quite like to test people and go, "Do you know who this is?" I had somebody when we were at Alton Towers a couple of years ago, and the guy goes, "Can I stop you a minute, pal?" And asked his daughter, "Name these tattoos." And his daughter, who was younger than my Jamie, was like, "Dum dum dum," and I'm like, "Amazing." But she didn't get Visionaries. The only person when I went, "Do you know what this is?" To was the Mapes brothers, because they obviously knew. But I was like, I have to show you one of my tattoos, because you're the only two people who will fully appreciate and love it the way that I love it. And the two of them were like, "That's brilliant." So I'll make sure I show you next time I see you. But I've got a wee bit of Jason the Wheeled Warriors. I've got Thundercats. I've got, the obvious ones, but I like the wee kind of obscure ones in there as well. But yes, John, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. And over both episodes, chatting normal cartoons with you, and then really getting into Visionaries. When you picked this, I was over the moon, because it's certainly one that I was looking forward to speaking to with somebody, and I was hoping somebody would pick. So thank you very much. We never even touched on the unreleased toys, which, like many 80s toys, there was a second kind of wave due to be released. I do highly recommend going on to, I'm sure it's the visionaries.net is the Mapes Brothers website, and it is a feast of amazing images of the unreleased stuff, of loads of information that, they really have done an incredible job pulling together some bits. Unlike, as I said, in the main one, Bionic 6, which I love, doesn't have a resource like that. I'd love somebody to create a resource for that one for me. But Visionaries does have something good out there. So we're going to wrap up. John, would you like to share with everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on various Facebook pages, mainly the TFYTC, which is the one that I maintain, uphold the law.
I am the law.
There's only two rules on that page: no selling and don't be a dick. And I'm sure you can all follow that.
Is that why I get kicked? I don't know which one. No, I'm looking.
A lot of people share their YouTube channels, which is kind of what does what it says in the tin, but there's obviously a lot of good discussion around Transformers. But I do try and talk about other lines. But hey, it's a fandom, isn't it?
Yes.
And sort of stuff selfishly for myself. Instagram is where I do my pictures, and YouTube where I'm again slowly coming back into doing the video making. You can find me by searching the name BordersDude with a capital B and a capital D, although to be honest I don't think it really matters if you have the caps in. But you'll find me there, and you'll know it's me because there's a little lovely logo made by Rudy Zoo of a robot as my avatar. Wonderful man, Rudy.
Lovely man, yeah. I think Rudy'd be a good guest to get on here in the future. But no, it's a good take kind of to be able to get you. So thank you so much. As I say, and I'll continue to say, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's always a pleasure speaking to you, John. Thank you very much for sharing with us and the audience. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast only show. Do remember that, yes, there will be 2 episodes a month on this. There is also our regular content on YouTube, where we do our main show, where we look back at 40 years of Transformers, which is also available in podcast format. But we also have a couple of mini episodes we do on a weekly basis that are only available on YouTube. So please keep an eye on the channel and make sure you keep up to date with all of our lovely content. Thank you very much, John, and thank you everyone for listening. Take care now.
Take care.